Research can be defined as the in-depth study of something in search of new information. Research is the process of gathering information for the purpose of initiating, modifying, or terminating a particular investment or a group of investments. Generally, research is a systematic search of knowledge through a medium of study, observation, comparison, and experiment. What is meant by a research process means it is a series of various actions which are necessary to effective research work. There are 7 steps involved in a research process. It starts with define a research problem. There are two types of research problems. Those relate to states of nature, relationship between variables. Essentially, 2 steps are involved in defining research problem. One is understanding the problem thoroughly. First of all, we have to understand what is the problem in the research, and we have to rephrase the same into meaningful terms from a point of view. We have to identify the relationship between the variables, means we have to know what are the variables, what is a dependent variable and what are the independent variables. For example, job satisfaction is an dependent variable. It is depend upon the salary, maybe the timings of the employees, maybe the welfare facilities provided by the company, like this. So the job satisfaction is depends upon the working hours of the employees, wage salary of employees, welfare facilities provided by the employees, likewise. So we have to find out the relationship between the variables like the dependent and independent variables, whether they are correlated or not. And moving for the second step, that is review of literature. Once the problem is defined, we have to define the problem first, and a brief summary of it should be written down. So what comes for a research problem? The basic steps in research is we can have a research is possible in marketing, banking, insurance, transport, and export. For example, in marketing we have an areas of research such as product research, price research, etc. The primary decision in a research process is to select the research area, and then we move for a problem what we have to define. Next, a problem is well defined in a half solved manner, means a nature of the problem determine the type of study we have. For example, declining the sales, profit, market share, or customer loyalty are not the problems. The process involved in defining a problem is, in first one, a statement of the problem in a general way, understanding the nature of the problem, and surveying the available literature. Before this, we have to formalize a research objective after defining a problem, after a review of literature for studying so many of literatures of studies. We are moving for objectives. If you don't know what we are looking for, you won't find it. In establishing a research objective, the researcher must have answered the following questions, like which specific information, like what specific information should be project provide. If more than one type of information will be developed from the study, which is most important. And finally, what are the priorities? We have to keep it in mind. We have to frame the objectives. Objective what means the end of an aim, we call it as an objective. So we have to find out what are the objectives we're looking forward. And the second one is the type of study what we have, like exploratories or empirical, maybe descriptive studies on groups or observations, whether it depends on the qualitative research or quantitative research. This all comes under the research categories. And next one is of third important one is of formulating hypothesis. Formulating hypothesis is a tentative assumption made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical sequences. A hypothesis should be very specific and limited to the piece of research in hand because it has to be tested. The role of hypothesis is to guide the researcher by delimiting the area of research and to keep him on the right track. So hypothesis is just a tentative assumption, like hypothesis of no differences, like hypothesis with of differences. Generally, a hypothesis can be a positive or a negative statement. Suppose the hypothesis is a woman perform better in administrative job than men. It will not be in a null hypothesis, as null hypothesis is a hypothesis of no differences. This will be an alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis in this case will be women and men perform equally well in administrative jobs. This means that there is no difference in their performances. We have to state the assumption or the hypothesis which should be a positive, like an alternative hypothesis, or it is a negative statement which we can prove, which cannot be proved as a null hypothesis. And the fourth step in of a research process is of preparing a research design. The function of a research design is to provide for the collection of relevant evidences with minimal expenditure of the effort, time, and money. The research purpose may be grouped into four categories. One is exploration, descriptive, diagnosis, and experimentation. And the fifth important step in research process is data collection. We categorize the data into two categories. One is primary data and the secondary data. The primary data is collected by some observations through a personal interviews, by through telephonic interview, or by mailing of a questionnaire, or send it of a questionnaire through Google Docs, or schedules, like we are explaining the questionnaire questions to the persons or the customers directly, so that we can collect the information primarily through some observations. And coming for second type of data collection is secondary data, that is already available and is not collected originally by the researcher for the intended study. For example, like published resources including historical documents, public records,